Hello. I am Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute Fellow at the University of California, Irvine, here to bring you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas War. It is currently the evening of January 29th, 2024 in the United States, the morning of January 30th, 2024 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, there were many different reports coming in today following the summit meeting that occurred yesterday in Paris between the head of the CIA, the head of the Mossad and the Shabak, Egyptian Minister of Intelligence, and the Qatari Prime Minister. According to reports in Israel, the heads of the Shabak and the Mossad conveyed in the meeting that Israel will be flexible on all facets of the deal, including the amount of days of the truce, release of Palestinian prisoners, increasing humanitarian aid, but the one non-negotiable term is ending the war. That, according to Israel, is off the table. Reportedly, Qatar, Egypt, and the United States are now going to give these terms to Hamas and pressure them to accept the deal. According to some reports, negotiators are hoping to begin with an initial phase of the deal, focusing on a more humanitarian side, the release of hostages who are women, children, and elderly in exchange for Palestinian prisoners, increasing humanitarian aid, and a truce that will then bring the sides to an extended deal. Related to this, Sky News in Arabic reported today similar things, stating that a first phase, including 35 hostages being released in exchange for 150 to 200 Palestinian prisoners, is what is being negotiated and possibly even agreed upon. NBC announced that in the Paris summit, Israel agreed to a proposed deal, and that the draft was now going to be given to Hamas. According to Sky News, the deal includes a 45-day truce, in which dozens of hostages will be released, with the key of exchange being between 100 and 250 Palestinian prisoners per hostage, i.e. releasing between 4,000 to 5,000 Palestinian prisoners, including quote-unquote heavy prisoners, that is, the leaders of different organizations. Usually this refers specifically to Marwan Barghouti. However, there are other very heavy prisoners who are to be released in this deal. I will add that while the deal states, according to NBC, 4,000 to 5,000 Palestinian prisoners released, this is out of roughly 8,500 to 10,000 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails. According to the NBC report, this deal also includes a substantial increase of humanitarian aid. Relating to all this, however, Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel stated through his office that all of these reports are wrong, and while there are still negotiations and there are advances in negotiations, the terms that are being cited in these reports are completely unacceptable to Israel, adding, "We will continue until ultimate victory." Other statements in Israel said that there's been no debate about the number of Palestinian prisoners, and while Israel is going to be flexible, those numbers are far out of range of what Israel is willing to give. In other news, Qatari Prime Minister Mohammed Athani today stated that talks are improving and implied that Hamas may have backed down from the demand for a complete ceasefire. According to what he stated, while up until now the negotiations have been stalled as a result of the demand for a complete ceasefire, now it may be possible to achieve a complete ceasefire later. Later in the day, however, Hamas published a statement outright rejecting this, stating that the terms of the deal are unacceptable and adding, and I quote, "Israel must cease its aggressions and withdraw from the Gaza Strip before any exchange occurs." Importantly, while this statement, there was also a joint statement by Hamas and the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, it is important to note that they made the statement before actually receiving the terms. So Qatar and Egypt, after the summit, are going to present the terms to Hamas. Hamas now issued that statement saying they're not going to accept anything until there's a complete IDF withdrawal and cessation of hostilities. However, they haven't seen the actual deal yet, so there's probably going to be future developments soon. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken in the United States stated in response to Hamas' statement, the deal is a strong one and negotiators concur. Hamas has to make their own decisions. And reportedly, an Israeli delegation arrived in Egypt to continue the ongoing discussions. We will likely hear more about this in the coming days. Moving on to the ongoing hostilities in the Gaza Strip. There was a barrage of rockets sent today from the Gaza Strip towards the central parts of Israel after many weeks and no such barrage was sent towards the center of Israel. A barrage of over 10 rockets targeting the areas of Tel Aviv, Hulon, Bat Yam, Nes Ziona, Be'er Yaakov, Ramle, and Rishon LeZion was sent. According to reports, some of these rockets landed in the area of Rishon LeZion, but no injuries were reported. Continuing to the fighting in the Gaza Strip, there was a report in Israeli military radio today that the IDF is planning on expanding its activities in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip in light of Hamas's attempts to rehabilitate itself that have been reported in recent days. Related to this, in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip today, the IDF called upon Palestinians in the western parts of Gaza City to immediately evacuate to shelters in Deir al-Balach, which is in the central parts of the Gaza Strip. The IDF published a map indicating which neighborhoods need to be evacuated. These were Al-Nasser, Sheikh Redwan, Al-Shati, Rimal, Asavara, Sheikh Ajalin, as well as Tel El-Khalwa. After this, the local sources in the Gaza Strip reported that 10 Palestinians were killed in a bombing that hit an UNRWA shelter in the neighborhood of Rimal, and the Saudi Asharak network reported that the IDF is surrounding the El Shifa hospital in the central parts of the Gaza city as well. So, after the IDF stated that it is going to increase its operations in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip and issue these evacuation orders, today we're already seeing increased fightings. In addition, in the Shati refugee camp in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, a major IDF raid was reported, including 3 different divisions that entered from the north and the south. According to reports, substantial gun battles developed. The IDF reported at least 30 Hamas operatives were killed. In addition, several gun battles were reported specifically along the coastal areas of the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. According to the IDF report, it uncovered launching sites and weapon storages, and 5 Hamas operatives were killed in the different battles. In the central parts of the Gaza Strip, there were ongoing battles reported in the different camps, specifically in El Bureij and El Maghazi refugee camp. No details were given. Moving on to the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, that is where the majority of fighting occurred in the last 24 hours. In Han Yunis, the IDF uncovered a substantial tunnel network dug under a cemetery in the Bani Suhaila area in the heart of the city. The tunnel reportedly involved many bunkers and different rooms, including a command center for the commander of Hamas's Eastern Han Yunis brigade, from which parts of the October 7th attack were coordinated. According to other reports, the tunnel was used also in order to move fighters from one area of the city to another, and in the ongoing fighting right now, it was 20 meters deep and a kilometer long and was destroyed. Other news related to Han Yunis, there was substantial expansion of IDF activity reported in the last 24 hours. The IDF stated that it took over Hamas outposts, training facilities, a communications outpost, the military intelligence building of Hamas in the area, a substantial rocket-making factory, and many Hamas offices, including that office of Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. According to other reports, a Palestinian Islamic Jihad apartment was also stormed, a major gun battle developed. In addition, it was reported that Hamas was attempting to fire RPGs from an area near the El Amal hospital in Han Yunis that was attacked and the operatives were killed. In addition, the IDF reported that Hamas's western Han Yunis brigade is close to being defeated and that the IDF is now turning to engage the southern brigade. Importantly, according to the IDF, those rockets that were launched today towards the center of Israel were launched from the southern parts of Han Yunis. Other news relating to the Gaza Strip, the IDF put out a summary today stating that in the Han Yunis operation thus far, the IDF estimates 2,800 Hamas operatives, that is 2/3 of the group's fighting force in the region, have been killed. Other figures it released stated that 105,000 Palestinians have evacuated through humanitarian corridors from Han Yunis towards the El Muasi refugee camp and towards Rafah, while the IDF also reported that it arrested 340 Hamas operatives trying to evacuate among civilians. Other news, there was a report today that on Thursday, Israel's War Cabinet approved, under monumental U.S. pressure, a UN commission that will visit the northern parts of the Gaza Strip and map out the feasibility and needs for civilians to return to the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. Reportedly, Israel agreed on 3 conditions. The first is that the commission, before going to the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, does a tour and surveys the areas surrounding the Gaza Strip that were attacked on October 7th. Second, Israel, once it verified and recognized that in allowing this commission, Israel is not conceding that civilians will return to the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. And third, Israel conditioned this commission on the fact that an American representative be part of the commission. It was not reported when, in fact, this commission will enter. One of the problems, reportedly, is who is going to guarantee the commission's security. Is it going to be the IDF, local UN security, or other forces? Other news, Defense Minister in Israel, Yoav Gallant, stated today that according to his estimates, a quarter of Hamas's forces in the Gaza Strip have been killed in the war, and at least a quarter have been injured. Regarding casualties, no IDF soldiers are reported killed in the last 24 hours, leaving the number of IDF soldiers that have been killed in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began on 222. Close to 1,300 IDF soldiers are reported injured in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began. The Palestinian Health Ministry is reporting 215 Palestinians killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of Palestinians that were killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 26,637. 65,387 Palestinians are reported injured, and there are still thousands buried under the rubble, most of them presumed dead. Moving on to the humanitarian situation, other countries today announced that they are suspending their funding to UNRWA. Specifically, Austria, New Zealand, and Romania made those announcements today. Thus far, 12 countries have announced that they are suspending their funding for UNRWA, some of these just for a few months, some of these for the first half of 2024, pending the investigation of the reportedly 12 workers of UNRWA who participated in the October 7th attack. This also came under heavy condemnation from UNRWA, stating that the group is providing any and all humanitarian aid that exists in the Gaza Strip, and cutting its funding is going to lead to a complete catastrophe. Related to this, the head of UNRWA, Philip Lazzarini, was due to visit Israel in the coming days. Reportedly, however, Foreign Minister Israel Katz in Israel ordered his office to cancel all meetings with him, tweeting, "Terrorist supporters are not welcomed here." Amidst these investigations of UNRWA, the Wall Street Journal reported today that intelligence reports suggest that roughly 10% of UNRWA workers are affiliated with Hamas or the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and half of the workers have family members who are also part of either Hamas or the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. UNRWA has reportedly 12,000 workers. UNRWA has been stating that all of this hype and countries canceling their funding is a result of 12 out of 12,000. However, this report in the Wall Street Journal that relies on intelligence sources both in Israel and the United States states that the number is actually much more. Other humanitarian news, the Palestinian Health Ministry published estimates today that some 700,000 people in the Gaza Strip are suffering from infectious diseases, including skin diseases, internal infections, jaundice, and digestive diseases. According to the reports, many of these diseases are attributed to a complete lack of clean water that is accessible to people in the refugee camps, also to the rainfall that has made the conditions in the refugee camps that much more less hygienic, and in general to a lack of hygienic conditions in the very overcrowded camps throughout the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, specifically Rafah and Al-Muasi. Other news, protesters in Israel today continue to attempt to block the Kerem Shalom crossing. Yesterday, the IDF declared the Kerem Shalom crossing a closed military zone because it stated that it needs to abide by the injunctions leveled at Israel by the ICJ and allow humanitarian aid in. According to a report, these protesters trying to block trucks coming in today were arrested. However, neither the IDF, nor the Palestinian Red Crescent, nor the UN put out any numbers regarding how many trucks did manage to enter the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. Moving on to the West Bank. An IDF soldier was badly injured in a ramming attack that occurred in Haifa in the northern parts of Israel. The attacker reportedly hit the soldier with a car, then exited his car with an axe and arrested civilians. He was shot and killed. According to initial estimates, the attacker was a Palestinian from the West Bank. However, this is yet to be confirmed. Other news, it was an attempted stabbing attack by a Palestinian in the West Bank. A 16-year-old Palestinian rushed soldiers at a checkpoint with a knife. He was also shot and killed. No IDF soldiers were injured. Regarding IDF activity, substantial IDF activity was reported in the Jenin refugee camp. The IDF reportedly entered the area, uncovering roadside bombs and weaponry. Confrontations erupted, and one Palestinian was killed. In the refugee camps around Nablus, specifically Balata, Askar, and in the Kasbah of Nablus, the IDF also carried out substantial activity. Many Palestinians were reportedly questioned, and weaponry was confiscated. Several arrests were made, and several Palestinians were injured in the confrontations. Either IDF activity was reported in the areas of Kfar Akeb and Kfar Azun. Weapons were confiscated and arrests were made. There's also other activity reported in Yabed and Tulkarem, where also it was noted that IDF bulldozers were among the units entering the area. In the Dora village near Hebron, 2 Palestinians were reportedly killed by the IDF. According to the reports, it stated that the circumstances are unclear. It is unclear what happened. Likely this was confrontations somewhere around the village where the IDF has regular checkpoints stationed. These various different confrontations that occurred in the West Bank in the last 24 hours, a total of 5 Palestinians were killed, 19 are reported arrested. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel, southern parts of Lebanon, continuous rockets and missiles were sent from Lebanon targeting the northern parts of Israel in the last 24 hours. Rockets targeted the areas of Kiryat Shmona, Matat, and the Upper Galilee. The Biranit outpost of the IDF was also hit with Burkan missiles. 2 soldiers were reportedly injured. Rockets were also sent towards Misgav Am, Margalit, Manara, Rosh Nikra. Hezbollah claimed 6 barrages. However, according to reports, many more rockets were sent. Regarding IDF retaliations, the IDF announced that it carried out attacks against Hezbollah infrastructure and lookout posts in the areas of Mechaba, as well as at Taiba and Maruna Ras. Other attacks were also reported in the Yarun area, where 2 military compounds housing Hezbollah operatives were reportedly attacked with IDF warplanes. In addition to this, El Miyadan reported artillery attack of the IDF in the villages of Kila and El Khiyam. Other reports suggested there was artillery fire in Ramesh, and El Manar also reported attacks in the areas of Yarin, Adaharia, Alma Sha'ab, and Ita Sha'ab as well. Other news, in Syria, there was reports of an attack in the Asaida Zainab area of Damascus, targeting the headquarters of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards in the region. The Syrian Human Rights Observatory reported that 7 people were killed, while other sources said that 2 people were killed and others were injured. Syrian TV stated that Iranian advisors were among those who were killed. However, later, the Iranian ambassador in Syria stated that no Iranians were killed, and Syrian TV removed this report from their website. At this point, there's no official report of what exactly was attacked or how many people were killed. Israel has made no claim of responsibility. However, all eyes point to the fact that this was likely Israel, which joins other attacks Israel carried out against different Iranian Revolutionary Guards activity, both in Lebanon and in Syria. Moving on to the regional developments, the Pentagon announced today that in the attack that was carried out yesterday with drones against a Tower 12 base of the United States on the border of Jordan and Syria, Hezbollah traces can be seen on the drones that were attacked. According to reports, the reason the drones managed to get through was that U.S. drones were also returning to the base at the time, and thus the radars were confused and thought that these were friendly drones that were returning. 3 Marines were reported killed and 40 were injured. It was not reported what Hezbollah traces on the drones actually means. Likely this means that either these are the types of drones that Hezbollah uses, or that there's some intelligence the United States has that Hezbollah had played a role in launching these drones. However, at this point, the whole thing is kept very secret. Al-Arabi al-Jadid reported today that pro-Iranian militias are evacuating their command centers in the region out of fear of U.S. retaliations. Yesterday, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin did state that the U.S. would retaliate where and when it sees fit. Likely these retaliations will be pretty wide, targeting militias both in Iraq, Syria, possibly even in Jordan. Remains to be seen. Other regional news, the Houthis in Yemen reportedly launching missiles towards a U.S. Navy ship. There was no confirmation of this from the Pentagon or from UKMTO or from anywhere else, so it is unclear if those missiles were in fact launched, if they were, if they hit anything. Moving on to some of the political and general trends for the last 24 hours is ongoing political turmoil in Israel following the convention that was attended yesterday by many government ministers calling for the reoccupation and resettlement of the Gaza Strip. Critique of government ministers attending this conference and speaking at it and calling for the reoccupation, resettlement of the Gaza Strip and willful immigration of Palestinians from the Gaza Strip was leveled both from the opposition, importantly also from members of the war cabinet, specifically Minister Gantz and Minister Eisenkot. Both stated that Netanyahu's lack of condemnation is in fact a sign of his lack of leadership. Minister Gantz specifically stated that the fact that Netanyahu is not condemning this shows that he is losing control of his coalition and of his government. In turn, Minister Yitzhak Wasserlov of the Jewish Power called on Netanyahu to choose between Itamar Ben-Gvir and Benny Gantz, stating that the two sides are starting to part ways, and Netanyahu is going to have to choose. Amidst this, it was reported today that Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke with the heads of his original coalition, stating, "I do not intend to go to elections. I will maintain the original 64. No one has to go anywhere," meaning that as more fractures appear in the coalition that was established in the emergency government after the war, right now, as fractures are developing, Netanyahu is stating, "I will stick to my original government of 64, that is, the government between the Likud, the most extreme hawkish right-wing elements in Israel, the parties Religious Zionism and Jewish Power, as well as the two ultra-Orthodox parties." Netanyahu is saying they, as far as I'm concerned, are the base that I'm sticking with. Other political news, U.S. National Security Council spokesperson denounced the conference that was attended in Jerusalem, stating that the statements made are insightful, irresponsible, and that the U.S. expects Prime Minister Netanyahu to live up to his word when he says that Israel does not intend to reoccupy Gaza. The conference was also condemned by France and Germany. Other news, Pramila Patten, who's a special UN envoy for sexual violence in conflict zones, arrived in Israel today. She's due to meet with witnesses, survivors, medical, and security officials who all dealt with October 7th. She today called upon people to come forward and report the crimes, stating that she guarantees that the crimes will be punished. Moving on to speculations regarding the future of the Gaza Strip, after speaking at that conference yesterday, Finance Minister and leader of religious Zionism in Israel, Bezalel Smotrich, today spoke again and made his plans even clearer. He stated, and I quote, "The only way to ensure our control in the territory over time is to establish a military regime that will govern Gaza, oversee humanitarian aid, and not allow Hamas's civilian administration to return, until a local leadership which denounces terror and can manage civilian matters rises in the Strip." He later added, "Alongside security control, we must renew the settlements in the Gaza Strip, because there is no security without settlements, and you cannot create military presence in the field without civilian life." He also added that this future military regime will be able to expel UNRWA from the Gaza Strip, and will also, and I quote, "facilitate immigration of hundreds of thousands of Arab refugees that are begging to leave the Gaza Strip to other places in the world where they can live in safety." However, contrary to this, there was a report today in Israel's Walla news agency that Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant recently guaranteed to U.S. officials that Israel will not allow the establishment of settlements in the Gaza Strip and will not allow civilians into the buffer zone. So what we're seeing here is, again, that on the one hand, there is no coherent plan of the Israeli government regarding the future of the Gaza Strip, and we're seeing that the IDF is, as it stated it might have to do, starting to reactivate its units in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip because the power vacuum, the lack of thinking of what is going to happen in the day after, is causing Hamas to regain some territory in the area, on the one hand. On the other hand, we're also seeing that elements in Israel's political establishment are starting to sense that the debate of the day after is looming, and they're trying to stake their ground, specifically the hawkish elements, stating that they are interested in reestablishing a long-term occupation and settlements, whereas in turn, Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant vocally stating that Israel does not intend to do that. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.